Welcome everybody. We're going to get started with a very special ICP webinar series today. As most of you know, this is the first in a three-part series. And I say special, not least of which because of our exceptional speaker, who I'll introduce in just a moment. But this webinar series was put together very quickly because of the need for so many people around the world to get whatever guidance is possible as we're dealing with this international pandemic. We at ICP are committed to issues of human rights and to bringing together psychologists and serving people around the world. Offering webinars is part of what we do, and we're very pleased to be able to bring everybody together for this webinar. Just want to make a quick note. As I mentioned, this is the first of three, and we will be opening up the second and third webinars to several hundred people at a time for anybody who isn't able to log on in real time. Today, they will have the opportunity to see this in just a few hours when this is posted online. And you should feel free to tell colleagues and friends that they can log on to the ICP website and watch this presentation for free. And we are leaving it there as a public service to anybody who would like to see it. So I want to just lay out the structure for today's presentation. We're very lucky to have Dr. Joffe Ellis presenting for us and answering questions. And that's how we're going to use our time today. Dr. Joffe Ellis will begin by presenting an overview of REBT. And then the remainder of our session, approximately 40 minutes or so, will just be spent on questions and answers. As we had asked, many of you posted questions already, and we've taken them down and we're going to present these questions. You should also feel comfortable while you're watching to present questions, type them in at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a chat icon or a Q&A icon. Either one of those will be fine. I will do my best to read and kind of select questions that represent a lot of our audience, and then I will present them to Dr. Joffe Ellis. So we are kind of working with this as it emerges. We're very lucky to have this happen, and it will shape the way the next two presentations go. So without any further delay, I want to introduce our speaker. So Dr. Joffe Ellis was married to Albert Ellis. Many people consider Albert Ellis one of the most important psychologists of the last 100 years. He is the designer of rational emotive behavior therapy. And today, Dr. Joffe Ellis is considered the world authority on REBT. She has learned and lectured around the world in India, in Mexico. She worked at 9/11 for recovery workers. She has written articles for Psychology Today. Many of you are able to see her webinars and presentations as she travels around the world, educating people on the value of REBT. So I will stop talking now and let Dr. Joffe Ellis take over the rest of this presentation. And then after she introduces the topic, I will come back in a few minutes and begin presenting questions. So please go ahead.
Great, thank you. Am I on mute, off mute?
You're good.
Great. My heartfelt thanks to Dr. Andy Simon and to Dr. Mary Bullock, who's doing all the organising, or along with Dr. Simon behind the scenes to make this possible. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be with you all, despite and including these circumstances, these strange times that we're living in. Although when you think about it and look back through history, doesn't every era have its unique challenge, and some more dramatic than others? My particular heartfelt thoughts and prayers are with people who right now are experiencing pain and suffering through the illness, and frankly, for any reason. Those who have lost people who have died, not only through this virus, but for any reason. And really it reminds us all that being human is a finite condition. Some people have joked it's a terminal condition. And one of the keys to coping better at this time is to be willing to think about our thinking. What are we telling ourselves? What are our attitudes right now? And are they based on logic? Are they based on wisdom? Or are we succumbing to fears unnecessarily? Now, for some people, what I just said might sound controversial, succumbing to fears unnecessarily. I wrote a few things down recently when I've heard things being said by journalists on the television, or seeing things online, or podcasts, or reading things in newspapers and magazines. And one very common message that I'm hearing is, it's okay to not be okay right now. And of course it's okay to not be okay right now. Many of us, though not necessarily all, but many of us are coming to terms with a crisis and a situation the like of which we've not experienced before. So yeah, compassion on ourselves, important not to be demanding that we feel any particular way, that we're not in a particular instant. However, having said that, and one of the purposes that I'm very grateful to be able to share with you today, what I'm going to share with you, is that it's not our circumstances that create our emotional experience, no matter what virus is going around, no matter what catastrophe, no matter what discrimination we're facing, no matter what challenge we're going through. And the nature of life is that it will, in all probability, for all or most humans, contain some loss, some suffering, some injustice. Isn't that the fact? So if we're willing to accept that fact, it doesn't mean to like it. And here's what I very much want to emphasize today. If we realize it is not the situation that's creating our emotional distress, but our attitude to it, our perception of it, that's creating whatever we're going through, then we have a choice. Now, I'm not suggesting that we put on a happy face when things are dire. And I'm not suggesting that we be apathetic or try to get in any neutral zone. No, one of the gifts of being human is that we have the ability to feel emotions. And that's enriching. And that doesn't just mean the happy emotions. Now, they're delicious, and may we have many of them. That too is in our control. Again, not the circumstances necessarily, but our attitudes, which are the things that create our emotions. And unfortunately, many people have not been taught, number one, that we have the power to create our emotional destinies, no matter how dire the circumstance, no matter what country we're in, what culture we're from, what beliefs we do or don't hold. We have the power to create our emotions according to the way we think. And so when we're aware of that, we have power, we have choice. And we're not educated, many of us, about the fact that there are healthy, difficult emotions, such as sadness and grief and disappointment. They're healthy. And there are the unhealthy ones that are debilitating, such as hopelessness and despondency, despair and depression. These largely contribute to suicide and certainly misery in life. And so in the next few minutes, in a kind of speedy fashion, in order to give time for me to address your particular questions, which again, as Dr. Simon mentioned, we'll have more opportunity, more time for that next week and the week after, because I won't be giving as much of an introduction in the future weeks. It's my pleasure to not only remind you that we have the choice, but to share with you the difference between the healthy and the unhealthy negative emotions. Many people are struggling with the unhealthy ones at this time, and to share with you the difference between the type of unhealthy, irrational thinking that creates the unhealthy emotions and the rational, healthy way of thinking, which will allow us during this challenging time and any challenging time in our lives to remain tranquil, to remain calm. And the more individuals who are able to maintain that state during such times, the more we can help other people, the more we can contribute to stability in society and globally at a times when things have been quite shaken. So with no further ado, I'd like to get into the nitty-gritty of the principles of, as Dr. Simon mentioned, rational emotive behavior therapy, or REBT. It's the original cognitive approach. It heralded in the cognitive revolution in psychotherapy. Prior to that, Freud and psychoanalysis was dominating. Sorry, I was distracted just now by a message. And so it's the active, directive, empowering approach that's imbued with compassion for oneself and others and life. So the first main principle for us to learn and imbue, if we haven't already, is, as I touched on, it's not our circumstances that create our emotions, but what we tell ourselves about those circumstances. Secondly, as I mentioned, when we think in healthy, rational ways about our circumstances, no matter how difficult or challenging, then we create what's called healthy negative emotions. Negative in this context, not meaning bad, but implying they're not pleasant. And when we learn the difference between the healthy and the unhealthy ways of thinking, we have the power to create our emotional destinies. Now, what are the different healthy versus unhealthy negative emotions? When we think in the unhealthy, irrational ways, we create depression, despondency, hopelessness, despair. We create anxiety and panic and extreme fear. We create rage. We create guilt, and we shame. Shame. When we think in healthy ways about those same circumstances, we create concern instead of anxiety and panic and fear. Concern is motivating. It allows us in a more steady and clear-headed way to assess what can I, what can't I do at this time with regard to the circumstance. When we think in healthy ways, we create sadness and disappointment and grief rather than debilitating despair, depression, and hopelessness. When we think in the healthy ways, we create healthy anger, meaning we are in control. With rage, it seems we react quite blindly, and that usually does more harm than good. With healthy anger, it's kind of related to our moral compass. And it's that adrenaline-fueled kind of know when we witness something brutal or unjust. But we're able to, at that point, not react and assess what might be the best thing to do or not do at this point. Finally, when we think in healthy ways, we'll create regret rather than shame and guilt. Regret is important because it allows us to work on accepting that we're all fallible humans that may make mistakes, and it shows our willingness to learn from any mistakes we've made with the hope of not repeating them again. So I hope now the difference between the healthy and the unhealthy emotions are clear. And so going back to what I said in my introduction, yeah, it's okay to not feel okay, but how about using the power that we have to create those healthy, not so pleasant emotions, to arm us, to not allow disempowerment, and to allow us to be pillars of strength and inspiration and comfort to others who don't know they have the choice, or who are succumbing to more intense crises on any level than any one of us may be at any point. So the next thing for me to share with you is the all-important difference between unhealthy, irrational thinking that creates those debilitating emotions and healthy, rational thinking. Let's start with the irrational ones. When we think in irrational ways, we have demands. It's very rigid, inflexible thinking. We have shoulds and musts and oughts. We overgeneralize. We blow things out of perspective. We catastrophize. We awfulize. We have low frustration tolerance, which means I must have what I want, when I want it, little baby that I am. I can't stand it, little baby that I am. When we think in irrational ways, we lack humor. We take things way too seriously. And there's no law written that humor, even in times of strife, is a bad thing. Quite the opposite in many cases. When we think in irrational ways, we tend to damn ourselves when we're not doing as well as we think we should. We damn other people when we think they're not acting, being the way we think they should. And we damn life itself when things are happening that we don't want to happen. Any one or all of those will contribute to our creating debilitating emotions. When we think in the rational ways, we're not namby-pamby. It's not about, as I mentioned earlier, being in neutral zone, not caring, not feeling. No, life is enriched by feeling emotions, but healthy emotions. So when we think in healthy ways, in response to whatever situation, we have preferences, we have desires, we have wants. Of course, we don't want people to suffer. Of course, we wish for a solution, a remedy, a vaccine now, yesterday. But we don't demand it. And you see, just now to insert the difference in the outcome of demanding is if I demand something and I don't get it, I'm more likely to make myself enraged, despairing, any one of those unhealthy emotions. But if I want something really, really badly, with all my heart, and I don't get it, oh yeah, I might grieve. But that's enriching. You know, grief is somewhat married to love or to what's meaningful to us. And if we're deprived of that, it is healthy to grieve. Some people mistake depression for grief. There's a difference. You know, I don't have time to go into all the details now. I hope this speedy, quick, brief version is sufficient. So, you know, when we have wants rather than demands and we don't get them, we'll be healthfully disappointed, sad, or grieve. That's okay. That's more okay than despondency and hopelessness at this time. When we think in rational ways, we have a sense of humor, we have a healthy perspective on things, we don't overgeneralize or have absolutistic thinking or think in stereotypical ways. We have what's called high frustration tolerance. In other words, and boy, do we need this right now. It means we can stand, we can tolerate what we don't like. We just don't like it. It's healthy not to like what's tragic, what's brutal. But we better accept that it exists. And when we're in a state of stability and emotional calm, we're better equipped to take action if and when it's possible. And when we think in healthy, rational ways, did I mention we have a sense of humor? We have a sense of humor. Not all the time, but as often as appropriate, and then some. Yeah, humor can be the best medicine in some situations. And one of REBT's most important reminders, and one of the things that REBT emphasizes the importance of the most, and much more for any of you who are psychologists or therapists, more than other cognitive approaches, though some have followed suit, is the emphasis on the importance of unconditional acceptance. Unconditional self-acceptance, unconditional other acceptance, and unconditional life acceptance. Where does it get us to demand something shouldn't be the way it is when it is the way it is? That does not imply that we don't, excuse the French, move our asses to try and change things for the better as much as we can. But we accept moment to moment the things in that moment that we cannot change. And again, from a place of stability, assess, what can I do? And then hopefully we do that. Unconditional acceptance doesn't mean complacency. It means being realistic and facing facts. So unconditional self-acceptance, that even though I might be suffering now, even in terms of physically, even though I may not be taking advantage of this at home time to do more than I'm doing, even though I may have lost my temper with someone and now they're making themselves very upset. Accepting that I'm a fallible human being. Yes, let me learn from my mistakes and try to do better, but I have worth, because one of the main premises of REBT, and I know I'm talking to people around the world, isn't this a universal truth? Every human being has worth simply because we exist, simply because we're alive. Oh yes, some of us may do more good things, some of us may do more evil things. But no one human only does good or only does bad. And it serves us well to accept ourselves unconditionally, to choose as much as possible to help others, and to remember we have worth no matter what. And then the second element of unconditional acceptance, unconditional other acceptance, that we're willing, and sometimes this takes courage, to unconditionally accept another person or people or body of people who have acted badly in brutal ways, in murderous ways, in evil ways. To be willing to accept that even though they've acted in obnoxious ways according to our preferences or according to universal humane preferences, that they're not totally bad. And frankly, if any one of us had their background, upbringing, experiences in life, their biochemical nature, genetic makeup, tendency to rage or depression or whatever, if any one of us had gone through what they had gone through, not being taught another way of thinking, not learning the importance of acceptance of others even if you don't agree with them, then isn't it highly likely that any one of us might have had the misfortune of behaving the way they might have or did? So it's very important for the individual soul and for contributing to stability in our community, society, and globally, to be willing to work on. I'm not saying it's always easy, but frankly, in the bigger picture, if our goal is more enjoyment in life and less misery, despite and including any war, virus, or any other challenge, then it's easier to make the effort to work on creating and increasing those healthy attitudes of unconditional acceptance than to keep on thinking the way we habitually have, which only fuel hatred and some of the other or all of the other unhealthy emotions I mentioned. Finally, unconditional life acceptance, where one makes the effort to, yes, acknowledge what isn't good right now. The coronavirus situation is not good right now. It's not the only tragedy that's going on. What about the ongoing, for years past, tragedy of the countless people dying, the babies dying of starvation in various countries? Part of being human is there will be loss and suffering. But it serves each of us, each individual human well, to be willing to remember that, yes, this is going on. What might I do to help? And at the same time, not instead of, remember what we still can be grateful for. Each one of us, each one of you who are taking time to listen to me and myself, have much we can be grateful for. If we're able to take this time and see and hear and think and have a cup of tea or coffee when we so choose, how blessed are we? Now, if we have windows, we can look at skies. I could go on and on. But my point is, we have a choice. That's sort of a theme throughout what I'm sharing with you. We can think in self-defeating ways or work on thinking in the ways that I'm suggesting in order to create healthy, it doesn't mean necessarily happy, emotions, and that makes us more effective in our lives. By the way, on my website, there's a tag, there's a self-help form that if someone is feeling one of those negative, debilitating emotions, you can work through the ABCD of that. I don't have time to go into it now. I want to leave time for questions and just have a few more things to say before I hand over to Andy, who'll start asking questions. So with awareness, we have choice. You know, if we're not aware we have a choice, we don't have a choice. Hopefully, after hearing this, you may have confidence that you have choice, or some of you may have already known this and it's a reminder. Share it with others, not just professionally. I believe many people listening may not necessarily even be therapists or psychologists. Share it with other humans that we care about in whatever way that's natural for us. And be willing to think about our thinking on a regular basis. Tune in. Let our emotions be our guide in a way. If, for example, you're feeling some anxiety, pause. What am I telling myself now to create this anxiety, to create this fear and panic? And if you're honest with yourself, you'll be able to identify some shoulds, some musts, some I can't stand, some worst case scenario. It will be awful, awfulizing, catastrophizing. And after we do that, and you'll see this in the self-help form, then we dispute each of those irrational beliefs and come up not with sort of gooey, sweet, unrealistic, happy thoughts, but realistically optimistic thoughts. Again, I can stand what I don't like. I just don't like it. I have resilience, even though right now I'm a doctor. I have worked 50 hours without a break. I'm shaking, I'm exhausted. But as a human, I'm resilient. I will do my best to do my best despite my current experience. And so we can think in those self-encouraging ways. They aren't unrealistic. But some people, because they're not in the habit of doing that, may succumb to, it's too much, I can't bear it, I can't stand it. And that doesn't help. And we have a choice. A few more things. So once we're aware of our irrational thoughts and tendencies to think in those ways, sometimes automatically, but with awareness, you'll be able to work on changing them, and over time they won't be your automatic default go-to beliefs. Ongoing effort is needed every day, and something that I share with my students, with my clients, with my loved ones, something I've done myself every day, the importance, the gift of taking time to pay attention to what we can be grateful for. And if you're not in 24/7 agony, and if you have the ability to think, and if you're not dead, then however bad things are, they could be worse. Let's pay attention every day and throughout the day to what we can be grateful for. My dear friend is a remarkable cardiologist here in New York City, and she shared with me once an article in the Journal of the American Medical Association, which demonstrated that gratitude has impact on the cardiovascular system. And I've read so many other articles. The mind-body emotion connection is irrefutable. Again, I don't have time to go into it now. Sure, you can Google. But, you know, when we think in these healthy ways, it's not just that we're creating healthy emotions that give us strength, steadiness, and tranquility in difficult times, but we're also strengthening our immune systems. You know, it's well known at this time of virus that many people may have had it and not known it and not suffered symptoms because they have probably a strong immune system. And the way we think and feel, and this is a scientific reality, contributes to that. And if we haven't done it till now, and if people you know and love haven't done it till now, if we and they are alive, and we are right now, then it's not too late to start. It's not too late to start. My final words before handing over to Andy, I apologize if I've taken a little too much time in this half, but so much I want to share with you. Some of the current issues that what I've shared with you are elegantly and substantially helped, you know, when we think in the way that I've recommended and therefore feel the way that we may feel as a result. You know, people that things are going through, the difficulties that people are talking about they're going through, loneliness, isolation, rage about why didn't they and they shouldn't, and pointing fingers and all of that, catastrophizing, awfulizing, terror, they're feeling terror and fear and panic and boredom, and perhaps they're slackening in their healthy habits, not going to the gym and getting a little lazy. And what else? I made some other notes, you know, that people are talking about through the media and elsewhere. One person on TV was saying, a journalist, I feel my identity has been taken away. Ouch. I hope as you hear this, you realize that is not a healthy idea, but if they believe it, then it's real to them, and they will create the resultant unhealthy emotion, and it will impact their health as well. No one can take away our identity. We may think they do. Now, are we in tune with our identity? What is our identity? I mean, what a fruitful time, by the way, this can be for us to really examine our philosophy of life, our individual philosophy of life and way of living. Let's use this time to reflect and grow and grow and grow and flourish, and then help others to do the same. What else have I written down? People saying, We're all experiencing panic and anxiety. How does it help to say that? The reality is a lot of people are, but not all people are. I'm not saying this to blow my horn. Lots of people aren't, because we're fortunate enough to be in the habit of choosing a healthy attitude. You know, in my life, and I think in many of the lives of you who are watching and listening right now, we've already gone through loss and suffering of one sort or another. And so we can get swept up in herd mentality and succumb to catastrophizing and panic, or we can remind ourselves we're still alive. We've been through that before. Now, maybe we didn't go through it before in the way most helpful. Well, I hope what I'm sharing with you now can facilitate you doing better in any crisis situations, including the difficulties that are happening now. And was there one more? I'll end with sharing this with you because I want to dispute it. And then finally, and thank you for your patience, because I was going to only speak for 20 minutes, a little bit more, but a psychologist was speaking on the television, and obviously I don't know this person personally, and I'm not going to mention his or her name, but I just want to give a different point of view. Of course, they were sharing what they've found helpful and what they believe is helpful. They were saying what people can do when they experience anxiety and fear and depression. This person said, first of all, identify your feelings. By the way, I agree with that, yeah. Then accept them as normal. Now, to that I say accept them. But normal can imply it's natural, it's understandable, and this is how I should be feeling. And I hope I've made clear enough to you that it's not necessary to feel anxiety and panic and fear at this time. Concern, compassion, grief and sadness, yes, that's part of the tapestry of life, in accepting that loss and suffering can be part of it. So I'm very uncomfortable about saying all emotions are normal with that implication. Accept your feelings, but then I would add, ask yourself, is this a healthy emotion? Is this enriching? Or is it debilitating me? And then the final thing that this, you know, without doubt, you know, came across very kind, well-meaning person said was, after you identify and after you accept as normal your feelings, the person said, then act, take some action, do something, dance, you know, draw, do some exercise, meditate, whatever. Now, I don't disagree for 1 minute that they're very helpful things to do, and I encourage each one of us to do whichever of those and then some. This is an important time for us, you know, who are isolated somewhat or totally in a way, to be creative, do lots of things, take action. But what I want to say to you is that will help you feel better in the short term, but it won't prevent you from thinking the same thoughts that might have created the panic or the anxiety. So by all means, do those things. But in addition, I encourage you, I urge you to be willing to identify the thoughts that have created, that you have believed because you've learned them, accept them, saw them when you were growing up in other people. Think about your beliefs and dispute and challenge the ones that are not rational, and replace them with realistic, optimistic, rational beliefs, and then repeat those new beliefs that you've come up with many times a day for at least a month and or the rest of your life. And in that way, it's a biological fact neuroplasticity shows it can take at least 30 days for new neural pathways to form, but they do. And with repetition, that happens. And so please be willing to think about your thinking, dispute the unhealthy thoughts, come up with healthy ones and repeat them often. And that way, we are claiming our right in this finite life that we have to create our emotional destiny, to minimize misery, to maximize enrichment and joy. And from such a place, we can share it with others, professionally, non-professionally, and that makes this world, with all its illness, death, and challenge while we're alive, it makes this world a blessed place to be in, cope in, survive in, and enjoy. So thank you, Andy.
So thank you, Debbie. That was just wonderful. And you should know that in addition to all the questions that we received prior to the presentation, we have lots of comments and questions coming up right now. So I want everybody to know something. We are going to try to address, with the remaining about 20 minutes, questions from people who are not therapists among our listeners. And then we will carry over and try to track the questions from therapists about working with patients into our next session, okay? So we will dedicate a lot of our time next time to guiding people so that you can guide people in how they can deal with their patients. But getting right to some of the questions from our population, some of them are very clear, Debbie. There are people who've lost their jobs, who don't have enough food, who are in parts of the world where there's a lot of challenge and poverty to begin with. How can they cope with a situation that is presenting to them basic needs in which they are not being met?
That's such an important question. The first thing that I wish for is that professionals in such places continue to do what they're doing, in doing their best to provide food and support and medicine to such places. This isn't the time, and I'm not the person to be able to talk about pragmatic action plans for providing food and shelter. That is vital. In order to feel healthy emotions, we've got to be alive. in order to live a better life, we have one of the basic requirements, food and shelter. But as we think back over history to times when communities were very isolated, there wasn't support from more wealthy, affluent places, communities, or countries. What happened then? What happened then? Often there was a wise person in the village. In addition to pragmatic action, finding ways to get water, shelter, and all, it would come down to adopting a healthy attitude of comforting one another as much as possible, engaging in play, in storytelling. There's no easy answer to that question. I wish I had the ability to provide food and shelter and medicine. That's what's needed before anything else. But the thing that I can comment on is if it's at all possible for people who are in such communities, either in them or visiting them, to do your best to be a model of resilience, comfort, empathy, compassion, and a little distraction of play and creativity. Some very great songs have been written by people when they've just lost their loved ones or lost through death a dear one. You know, suffering, and again, I'm not talking about physical debilitation. That has to be taken care of first. But if one is well enough, rather than feeling despondent and hopeless, to harness our creativity and make the most of what we have got when what we've got is little. And for people in the United States, what a luxury. You know, a lot of people can claim unemployment. In other countries, what? So in countries like the USA and my native Australia, hi Aussies, let's be grateful. And in other countries, I implore you, help others as much as you can to get their basic needs met. And also, not only that, also encourage them to be playful, creative, as much as their weakened bodies can.
Great. Debbie, like connected to that, there are many people who are able to get basic needs met, but like so many are isolated in one form or another. And they're having tremendous anxiety and depression, not only as a result of the isolation, but out of terrible fear of COVID-19. What can you say to these people?
Oh, great questions. Thank you. I say to the people asking those questions and everyone else, and to myself, reminder to self, make an effort to be primarily in the here and now. Because guess what? That's where we are. Is it helping a person to be worried I'm going to get it? No, if in the here and now, the thought is, I might get it. Well, they can allow a stream of thought, and that would be awful, and I couldn't bear, and I'm not making light of this. Sometimes I might have a dramatic, enthusiastic way of expressing. Please don't mistake me for being superficial about it. I'm not. But some people may tend to just keep on dwelling on what's fueling the fear. When the reality is, if they're thinking that, they're still alive. The reality is that if they're thinking that, they may not have it. They may be thinking that, and they may have it and no symptoms. They may be thinking that and have it with symptoms. The reality is they're still alive. The reality is there's a large likelihood people with symptoms will recover. There's a likelihood for a percentage of people they won't. Guess what? The coronavirus isn't the only thing that kills people. This is where it's so important to remind ourselves of the universal truth that to be human is to be finite. And so, to address such fears and any other, acknowledge, ask, what am I telling myself to make myself afraid? And dispute those fears. What, it would be terrible if I die. Well, once you're dead, you're dead. I don't want to suffer. Well, no one does. But in this moment, are you suffering? If you are, again, the pragmatic, can you do what's practical? But truly, by being in the here and now, taking pragmatic action, and additionally, not instead of, finding enjoyable things to do, remembering what we can be grateful for, doing things for other people, which at this time might be simply a phone call or an email, brighten their day, make a funny video, bring some laughs, whatever, be creative. But in conclusion, my bottom line answer is most fear, panic, anxiety comes from catastrophizing about what was and will be. And if you're able to catastrophize in the present moment, then you have the choice to challenge that and think, in rational, realistic, optimistic ways. Easier said than done, some people might say. I heard that a lot of times. Yeah, but guess what? The more often you do it, the easier it becomes. And in months, in years, it can become the automatic way of thinking.
Wonderful. Debbie, can you even expand also to this idea? Some people are expressing a sense of loss over the period of time in which everything seems to have stopped. And what will happen when we come out of this, but how do we deal with the anxiety and depression that's coming from what feels like a loss at the moment?
Before the coronavirus, didn't we experience loss? Maybe not as dramatic. When I say didn't we experience loss, I mean as individuals from time to time. I would think most of us have lost something that we would rather not lose. And so what is the point of spending energy thinking about what's been lost up until this moment? The fact is, we haven't been doing what we would rather be doing and what we were doing. That's true. And for some of us, since restrictions, we may not have been using this time in productive or enjoyable ways. Okay, that's water under the bridge, unless you want to dwell on it and torture yourself. The reality is, and it sounds trite, but it's a scientific fact. What's done is done. So, again, similar to the answer to the last question. Be in the here and now. None of us has a crystal ball. If I'm wrong, please let me know. You know, as far as I know, no one can accurately predict the future. We can have an idea of probabilities. I'm not saying that the past can't inform us of possibilities and probabilities, but not certainties. And that's another thing that a lot of people are having a hard time dealing with. The need for certainty. What's going to happen? You know, even if this didn't happen and you were rolling along, living the life you preferred, any of you who were, there's no way of knowing what might have happened the next day to totally change your life. That happens to a lot of people. It's happened actually every year to some degree or other in society, and sometimes more extreme than others. So it comes back to being willing to admit, and this takes being adult, you know, there is no certainty in life. There's probability, there's no certainty. Can we accept it? Are we willing to keep our focus mainly, not only, of course, it's important to prevent, prepare, anticipate, but not need to know exactly what to do and what will be, because we don't know exactly what will be. And so for steadiness, tranquility, good health, let's be here now. Okay, learn from this past little period of what we have experienced in isolation and not done much of. Let's consider the potential of what we can do during this enforced time, which includes, please try to bring joy to others. That's really good for oneself. I live in New York City, and at 7 p.m., and I think this is in other places, there's a shout out for 2 minutes where people go to windows and balconies and go, yay, yay, yay. And it started off as being a thank you for all the essential workers, medical and non. And it still is, but it's also a way of in a way connecting. Other people are out there in their little boxes. We're alive, and it's a great thing to do. Whether you can or can't in the place you live, again, my reply is predominantly be in the here and now. Look at the fears that are, the thoughts rather, that are feeding the terror, the fear and anxiety. It's healthy to feel concern, sadness, and disappointment, but let's work on being creative so that at this time we can also bring smiles to our faces and others and have some joy. You know, there are people who've survived wars and prisons and concentration camps. Viktor Frankl book, The Search for Meaning. And there are other books, and I've written an article about gratitude. There are people who have survived much worse than what we are going through, we who are healthy enough to be watching this now. And many of them succumb to hopelessness, illness, death, and I'm sure that their attitudes contributed to the weakening of their immune system that enhanced development of whatever latent or unlatent illnesses may have contributed to their death before they were really of a later age. And others chose to focus on what still was good, despite the horror around them. And to cling to hope, because where there's life, there's hope.
Thank you. This is so valuable. Debbie, I want to tell everybody, we are out of time for this session.
Oh.
But I'm going to ask all of our viewers to please log on to the ICP webpage and put down any questions that you like addressed. We have been trying to track everything that's getting written down. We want to compile them and be able to contribute our next session and the subsequent sessions to it. And so would everybody please post your questions, and we will do our best, and we anticipate opening this up to a much wider audience. Please also remember that by tomorrow morning, you should be able to go onto the ICP webpage, and you should be able to access this presentation and make it available to any of your friends or colleagues who are interested. For right now, I want to thank everybody at ICP. Always a special thanks to Mary Bullock, who's behind the scenes making this all work. And special thanks to Dr. Debbie Joffe Ellis. We will see everybody 1 week from today. Have a good week. Bye-bye.